Tenants and advocates in St. Paul, Minnesota are upset because a real estate landlord has been able to get a 15% rent increase in spite of the fact that they passed a rent control law that limits increases to only 3%. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, I've covered the rent control issue up there in St. Paul for a while now, and it really is interesting to me because I live in Nebraska, and, St. Paul's only about a 5-hour drive from here. So I've been up there to the Twin Cities many times, and you know what? When I see laws, like especially rent control laws, being passed so close to where I live, it scares me. I mean, it should scare everybody seeing, somewhere in the middle of the country passing a rent control law. So yeah, this is absolutely insane. So when they passed the rent control law, they limited all rent increases to 3%, but they said there was an exemption process that landlords could go through and then get rent increases more than 3%, right? So the landlord in this article that I'm going to cover today actually was able to get a 15% rent increase. So I'm actually surprised that the St. Paul City Council allowed this huge rent increase, but at the same time, the fact that the landlord had to go all the way to the city council and go through this hearing and all this nonsense just so they could raise the rent, that is ridiculous. And most landlords are not going to be willing to go through all of that ridiculous process in order to raise their rent. So they're just going to be stuck with that minuscule 3% rent increase. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? What do you think of the fact that, landlords are going to have to go through this ridiculous process just to get a rent increase bigger than 3%? Like, imagine you're a landlord up in St. Paul and you want to do a major renovation to your property, right? You've got this old property. It needs a gut rehab, essentially, new everything all the way down to the drywall. And otherwise you'd be stuck with $500 a month rents, but after you fix this thing up, it'll be like brand new and you'll be able to charge $1,500 a month. But in order to do that, you've got to go down to city council, file a whole bunch of paperwork, stand in front of them and let them decide whether or not you deserve to be able to raise the rents. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and landlords should not have to do that, okay? So even if you do get it approved, you're still suffering. You're still, facing all the consequences and ridiculousness of this policy. So my suggestion is, and this is what a lot of landlords are going to do, they're just not going to even invest in that city because they can go to the suburb right next door and they don't have to do any of that. They can go to Minneapolis. Minneapolis doesn't have rent control policy like this, and they can do the exact same thing without having to ask permission to raise their own rents. So let's get into the article. It's coming from twincities.com, and it says, after appealing St. Paul's rent control limit, owners of Raymond Avenue apartment building allowed a 15% rent increase. And those tenants are upset. So let's get into the article and see what it says. The St. Paul City Council on Wednesday voted 5-0 to grant a request by a pair of Raymond Avenue property owners to increase rents in their apartment building by 15%, or more than 5 times the city's new rent control limit, but not more. And the cost of utilities, once included in rents, must be added to the total. Pointing to a planned remodel of apartment units badly in need of long-deferred maintenance, Jim Lindquist and son Matthew Lindquist had appealed the city's new 3% rent cap at 1029 Raymond Avenue, a 12-unit, 2-story apartment building they acquired in April. So yeah, these guys, they bought this place in April, which, I'm surprised anybody is buying anything up in St. Paul right now. They must have got a monster of a deal because, they already knew that the new rent control policy was going to, take effect in May. So they probably got a great deal, because of all the deferred maintenance, etc. But they knew they would have to remodel the place in order to really make money off of it, and they would have to be able to raise their rents far above the 3%, which was allowed by the city's rent control cap. So they are the test subjects for the theory that, hey, if we apply, the city will allow us to have a larger rent increase than 3%. And in this case, it worked. But how many landlords are they going to reject? I don't know. I don't know. At this point in time, it could be every other landlord. They might have just accepted the first one to give landlords a little bit of hope. But what happens when, the next landlord comes up and they're saying, hey, the same thing. We need to do a complete rehab of these apartments so that, we can raise the rents, and they don't allow it. What happens then? Okay, that's my question. Or what happens if the city council gets replaced by an even more progressive city council and they just shut down all rent increases? It's possible. It's certainly possible, and I could see it happening. The request represents the first appeal to the new rent control limit to come before the city council for final approval. We're not trying to gouge anybody, said Jim Lindquist, addressing the council. We're not trying to gouge anybody, said Jim Lindquist, addressing the council Wednesday. Council member Mitra Jalali, who represents the neighborhood, said the rents had not gone up for some time, and the appeal was grounded in clear evidence of that. I personally care very deeply about additionally setting a standard and tone with property owners, and a clear legal basis why exceptions be granted, Jalali said. Council members Day Thao and Nelsie Yang were absent Wednesday. So yeah, what they're probably trying to do is, send a message out there to the developers, to the landlords, etc. Please don't stop investing in our city. We still need developers. But like I said, the problem is that the appeal process alone is too much for most landlords and too much for most developers to have to go through. Okay? Now, these guys, they were the case study, but if a new city council comes in there, it could be 100% rejections. They don't know. Or these city council members might get so much flack from the public for allowing this huge rent increase that they might just change their minds and stop allowing it. It's a bad situation to be put in, and my hope is that this law gets completely thrown out. Rent control appeal accepted, in part. The city allows landlords to self-certify increases between 3% and 8% through documentation that shows rent increases below 3% would not cover their expenses or provide a reasonable rate of return. Above 8%, property owners must attend an appeal hearing before a legislative hearing officer. On Wednesday, legislative hearing officer Marcia Mormond told the council she had met with the Lindquist to consider their three rent control appeals. She recommended allowing their first request, a 15% rent increase throughout the building, though utilities that had previously been paid by the landlord must be included in the total, she said. These charges are to be included for a total 15% increase, not more, she said. Natural gas, water, and sewer, those three things are being pulled out. So yeah, they had asked for a 15% increase and to be allowed to charge the tenants for their own utilities. So now they're like, well, no, we can't allow the 15% increase and that. The 15% increase has to include the amount the tenants are paying towards their utilities. So this isn't really a true 15% increase, okay? The money for the utilities is not money that the landlord is making. Okay, this isn't a profit for the landlord, when the tenant pays their own utilities. No, that's ridiculous, okay? I mean, this is where the rent control law is going. They won't even allow you to, sub-meter or, charge back the tenants for the utilities that they're using. That's so dumb. I mean, the whole process just is annoying to me. Mormond noted that the Lindquist had already embarked on a roof repair and laundry room improvements and planned improvements to garages. Other future improvements include new flooring, carpet, and appliance replacements that a previous owner had neglected, they told her. The Lindquists propose a thorough renovation of most units over the next 3 years and indicate these updates will mostly be made at the time the units turn over and units are vacant between tenants, she wrote in her July 12th recommendations. Mormont also noted that it was unclear under the terms of the city's new rent control ordinance if the debt the Lindquist had incurred in acquiring 1029 Raymond Avenue could be considered a valid maintenance and operating expense for the basis of crafting an allowable exception to the ordinance. So basically, what this person, this moron, is saying is, I don't know if, for the purposes of the ordinance, if the loan that you use to buy the property is enough of a reason to be able to raise the rent. Well, you're an idiot if you think it isn't, okay? Why else would I need to raise the rents other than to pay the loan? If I can't pay the loan with the rents, then I need to raise the rents, okay? Gosh, these people are so dumb. It's obvious that they're dealing with bureaucrats and politicians here because they have no clue about anything. What do you think the rents are doing? They're paying the loan. Nobody's buying buildings with cash. Okay, well, some people are, but most people use loans. I've mentioned this fact before that 60% of all buildings, landlords, 60% of landlords have mortgages or loans on their properties, okay? So most likely, especially when you're talking about large multi-unit buildings, we're talking about a landlord who has a loan on it. So not being able to raise their rent so that they can pay the loan for the building that they just bought within your city, isn't that what you want? You want people to be able to still buy properties in your city. You want landlords and developers to still want to invest. So if you don't let them raise the rents, without your stupid rules, they're just not going to do it. They're not going to do it. Okay? The current landlords are just going to say, hey, I can only raise my rent 3%, so I'm just going to let this building become dilapidated. Or my single family house, I'll just sell it to an owner occupant. I don't have to deal with this garbage. Okay? I'm getting completely out of the rental business. The big multifamily people, hey, we're just going to build condos. That's what the developers will say. We're just going to build condos. We're not going to build any more rental apartments. It's unworkable trying to build apartments here when we can't raise the rents. Okay, it's a bad situation, but nothing surprising.